Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you very much, Professor Campbell. My talk today is entitled The 1659-1661 ENSO in Java, Southeast Asia. Why is there no famine, or why there is no famine around this time? My talk has three components. Initially, I will introduce the theoretical and historiographical frameworks of my work, followed by a brief introduction to the region for the audience. And then in the third component, I will look at the Dutch narratives on Java around the time that this climatic anomaly struck Southeast Asia, along with developing my hypothesis on why there was no famine around this time. Theoretically, my work is based on researching Little Ice Age in the Indian Ocean. When we read histories of Little Ice Age, we realize a lot of the discussion on Little Ice Age and its human environment relationship focuses on North America, Europe, China, or Japan. The southern part, or let's say the southern fringes of the Indian Ocean, as it were, are still missing from the story to a great extent. And that is what I have been trying to, excuse me, develop in my research that I began at McGill about 2 years ago. So the Little Ice Age, which stretched from, let's say, the early 1300s until the early 1800s, with a more severe period from the late 16th century till the late 18th century, produced or is associated with, I must say, two sets of climatic phenomena that are closely interrelated with each other and have serious ramifications for human-environment relationship in the Indian Ocean world. These are the El Nino Southern Oscillation, also as I will be calling them ENSO, and the Indian Ocean Dipole. These two climatic phenomena are associated with rainfall anomalies, including droughts and even heavy rainfall resulting in floods across Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Historiographically, this particular phenomenon, especially the ENSO events, have been described by the environmental historian Richard Grove in terms of coeval climatic anomalies that struck South Asia and Southeast Asia in the 17th century. So this is my theoretical premise for today's talk. So let's have a look at what the ENSO event of 1659 and 1659 to 1661 meant for the world. It was a global climatic anomaly coupled also with the Indian Ocean Dipole, which produced droughts across the eastern part of the Indian Ocean, as it were in Southern Asia and Southeast Asia. In Southern Africa, this climatic anomaly was related to droughts, which eventually led to a war between the Dutch pastoralists in Cape Town and the indigenous African pastoralists because of a reduction in pasturage available for livestock. In South Asia, this climatic anomaly is related to a serious drought and a terrible famine that struck the Coromandel coast from 1659 to 1660. And in Southeast Asia, it's related to droughts in Java and droughts and diseases in the spice-producing islands of the Moluccas. Let's have a look at how Southeast Asia was circa the early 17th century. By the way, I must say this map is from the first volume of Anthony Reid's work, The Land Below the Winds. It points out the different political centers of early modern Southeast Asia. The region that we are going to talk about mostly today is shown at the far bottom of the map, Java, including the areas of Mataram and partly Banten. Here is a more higher resolution map for for the audience. This map, well, I take this map from Vermeergastra's book on the Dutch East India Company. It's a bit later in the sense it shows the regions as they existed in the 18th century, but more or less gives us a good idea of the locations or of the geographical regions that I'll be talking about. There is Banten and Batavia far on the western part of the island of Java, and the Sultanate of Mataram in the center, with its rice exporting port cities on the north. So just to introduce all of you to briefly to very basics of Java. In Java, the monsoon winds, which result in much of the rainfall and are crucial for agriculture, they blow from the west or the south from May to August, and from the northwest or northeast from December to March. 17th century Java, primarily its political landscape was dotted by three major states, Banten and Batavia in the west, and Mataram in the east. Java was a region of high-yielding, intensive wet rice cultivation, where rice was the staple diet, along with a high degree of dependence on fish, including the use of marine resources, primarily fish, for producing sauce, which was used with rice as a condiment. In terms of population growth, Java, as Anthony Reid has pointed out in his work, The Land Below the Winds, had a slow population growth in the 17th and 18th centuries. What are the sources that I look at for this talk? I primarily look at the archives of the Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC. I look at two components of the VOC archives. One is the letter that, one are the letters written from Batavia by the Governor General and the Board of Indies to Amsterdam. These were usually written twice a year, once in January and then again in December, but there could also be correspondence in the middle of the year around April or July and August. The other source which I look at is the Batavia Dagregister, which literally translates to a daily journal, which recorded the arrival and departure of ships and all other developments that were meant to be that were meant to have repercussions on the trade of the Dutch East India Company. So this was so far, this was the first component of my talk. I introduced you to the region that I'm going to talk about. Now I will focus on the second part, primarily the Dutch narratives on the ENSO event of 1659 to 1661. What do we read when we look at the Dutch narrative of the ENSO event in Java and Batavia in 1659? Prior to 1659, the region had had a good run of rice harvests from 1657 to 1658, and even in the first half of 1659, which was also marked by large exports of rice and foodstuff from Mataram. So the Sultanate of Mataram, which shortly ago I pointed out in the map, was a major source of rice and other edible goods for the Dutch East India Company in Java. Apart from this, there was also a steady supply of livestock, primarily cows and buffaloes, and at times also antelopes, which were used both as meat, and in case of the cattle, buffaloes and cows, they were also used for agriculture, for tilling the lands. So the Dutch narratives, primarily the letters written by the Governor General to the Gentleman 17 in Amsterdam, point out that the drought, ENSO-induced droughts, struck Java and Batavia from late 1659, while the Dutch lamented some of its effects, such as impact on agriculture. They also point out that some of the livestock began to deplete, or as it were, die because of the effects of the drought. And they anticipated that the inhabitants of Batavia and the surrounding islands, sorry, I beg your pardon, the surrounding regions would begin to clear forests in order to provide fodder to the animals. So what happens as the drought continued through 1660? The drought continues through most of 1660. Its effects began to tell more on the agriculture of the region. Sugarcane wilted in the fields. The drought also affected wet rice cultivation in the region. However, by late 1660 or early 1661, the Dutch again begin to speak of rainfall in the region, and they point out that a new rice crop was planted. Compared to Java, the Dutch narrative on the region of Mataram is a bit limited, because prior to the onset of the droughts in 1659, the Sultan of Mataram, Amangkurat I, also known as Susuhunang in literature, closed off the ports. So and even broke the Dutch factory at the northern Javanese port of Japara. So the reports which we get are limited. Nonetheless, they point out some of the survival strategies which were used by the ruler of Mataram. For instance, in 1659, the ruler of Mataram anticipated drought and a poor harvest because of the failure of rains, and began to construct granaries in order to store rice. Secondly, the ruler of Mataram, Amangkurat I, also closed off the Javanese ports, which stopped the trade in rice and other edible goods from that region to Batavia and other parts of Java throughout 1660 and 1661. A peculiar feature which strikes us when we read this narrative on the ENSO and its effects around Batavia and other parts of Java is there are hardly any deaths that are caused by either a famine or by a drought. So the question that I'm going to try and explore in the remaining few minutes of this talk is why there was no famine in Batavia or Java around the same time. The Dutch do not report of famine. And in this context, I'm sort of going to try and read the archive both against and along the grain, as it were. So here is my hypothesis. It's based on the evidence that's gleanable from the VOC archives. The region had a good run of harvests until 1659, which meant there was a steady stock of rice. Apart from this, there is a continual trade in rice and other edible products along the Indonesian archipelago, as well as from the Indian Ocean regions of Bengal and Arakan. What are these imports? These imports into Batavia, they comprise rice, dried fish, salted eggs, and animal meat, beef and pork. So what are the implications of this trade for the region during this ENSO event? It means that there was a steady supply of staple edibles, including rice and animal protein, which includes fish as well as other animal meats such as beef and pork. This meant there was a steady intake of calories throughout 1660 when the monsoons failed in Java, which ensured that an able-bodied labor force was available to work the fields when the rains arrived in early 1661. This, I argue, prevented a general famine in the region. In principle, my hypothesis builds on the arguments of Anthony Reid and Peter Baumgart, who asserted earlier that compared to South Asia, Southeast Asia fares better during climatic anomalies in the early modern period because of its access to alternate sources of food. But they do not explain how this process works. And that is what I have tried to do today. There is more evidence that I can proffer in order to support this hypothesis. For instance, in 1662, there was a short agricultural crisis again in Java, not caused by a failure of rains, but by infestation of rats and worms. As scholars like Richard Grove have argued, often insect vectors and rodent vectors respond to changes in temperature, changes in ecology caused by ENSO events. Such was the case in Java in 1662, when the Dutch reported that rats kept on infesting the rice fields throughout the year, resulting in serious damage to crops. But there is no famine in the region, and this results, as I argued, from a continual trade in edibles like rice and other products such as fish, eggs, and animal meat. What is more important is, even until this time, the northern Java ports along the Sultanate of Mataram are not exporting rice to Java, which meant there was a serious pressure on food security. And it is all the more remarkable that the region survived on a resilient network of intra-Asian and intra-archipelago trade. Agriculture returned to normalcy only from 1663, when the harvests were good, and Mataram as well. Mataram reopened its ports, ensuring supply of rice and edibles. I think I'm almost near my time. Sorry, I'll quickly wrap up. So, what is the broader relevance of all of this for understanding the effects of the 1659 to 1661 ENSO in the Indian Ocean world? The first point that I would like to make is there are multiple stories even for a single ENSO IOD event, and in this case, I talk about South Asia and Southeast Asia. For instance, Coromandel Coast in South Asia, which witnessed a terrible famine and drought around the same time. And on the other side of the Southeast Asian archipelago, in the spice-producing islands of Moluccas, there was drought and depopulation caused by diseases, primarily fevers. But it's difficult to tell whether these were malarial fevers or typhoid. So from that perspective, dietary habits and the argument that I made about dietary habits and calories offer only a partial answer on adaptation. Even the Coromandel Coast could depend on sources of food in other parts of the Indian subcontinent, such as Bengal or Gujarat or even Malabar, but it experiences a terrible famine. And in the Moluccas, which also depended on food from different parts of the archipelago, including the eastern part of Java. That's why I argue that dietary habits, and looking at this through the perspective of dietary habits and calories, only offers a partial answer. More importantly, this ENSO event was also connected to the movement of what I call climate refugees. For instance, people who people who sold themselves off to bondage in Coromandel were shipped by the Dutch to Southeast Asia in order to populate the spice plantations in the Moluccas. So they were perhaps, as I like to call, climate refugees. Based on all of this, what could be the future questions for research? There are 4 distinct ways. One is to look at adaptation strategies in the Moluccas during ENSO events and IOD events to find out why there are so many disease-induced deaths. Is it related to dietary habits and practices, or not having access to enough calories. And the other question which one could sort of explore is, do climatic anomalies offer a chance to secure short-term economic profits? And in this context, I could perhaps make a comparison with the boom in slave trade, which South Asia often experienced during the 17th century. Both European and private indigenous traders exported slaves from South Asia to Southeast Asia. In this context, primarily in terms of exporting rice and other edible goods, what do such climatic anomalies mean for merchants in rice exporting regions? I think these could be some of the questions that I might be able to explore in the future. I think I will stop here. I'm near my time. Thank you very much, Julie.